Hey everyone, Cam White here, and welcome to your 2022 year ahead horoscope for Scorpio Sun and Rising. In this video, we're going to be going over every major transit of 2022, and more specifically, going into how it's going to be affecting you as a Scorpio Rising. Now, this is pretty much a two-part video series that I'm doing. I have another video where I go over really all the major transits of 2022, but I talk about the transit in and of itself, what it's going to mean, what it's going to represent and symbolize. But in this video, we're going to be going over mostly how it's going to be affecting you as a Scorpio rising, or if you're a Scorpio sun and you want to watch this as your sun sign, that's fine too. But anyway, if you want to keep up with each individual month of 2022 and you want to have a monthly horoscope for you being a Scorpio rising, if you want to watch the Scorpio rising monthly horoscope for each month of 2022, be sure to check out my Patreon. I offer monthly horoscopes as well as ad-free content, early release content, a bunch of other content as well. So make sure you check that out. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. So give me a little patience here. This is my 8th time going through a 45-minute year ahead horoscope, and I'm at my wit's end. But being at my wit's end is perfect for the Scorpios. So, and I also have to remember everything that I've got to talk about too. So we start 2022 very interestingly because we end 2021 on an interesting note. We end 2021 with two things. One, Jupiter. Jupiter is going to be ingressing into Pisces. It's like the last day of 2021, but really the beginning of 2022 in January. Jupiter is going to ingress into Pisces. Now, before I talk about what that means, what's important to know is Jupiter ingressed into Pisces for like 5 minutes earlier last year or this year. So think of May and June of 2021. What was going on for you then? What was happening? Because you're going to see something that was going on then come back up again starting in about January of 2022. Jupiter represents things like abundance, growth, faith, hope, optimism, doing things in a big, larger-than-life way. It's about integration, spirituality, faith too, things like that. As Jupiter goes into its home sign of Pisces, Jupiter can operate really well here. Jupiter being about doing things fun in a big way, can do things in a fun and big way because it has the resources and the tools that it needs being in its home sign. But Jupiter is entering your 5th house. The 5th house rules things like love, romance, sex, pleasure, children, arts, music, creativity, recreation, like your hobbies and things, having fun just in general. So as Jupiter goes through your 5th house, maybe May and June, you were having more fun, having more sex, maybe your kids were doing better. Jupiter going in your 5th house, you're going to see a lot of those things come back up again. And we're going to keep talking about this throughout the year because Jupiter's going to fly through Pisces. So this isn't just the first time or the last time that we're going to talk about it. But Jupiter's going to go into your 5th house. You're going to be having more fun. You're going to be feeling more sexy. You're going to be being more creative and trying to enjoy things more. Jupiter also rules your 2nd house of your money, your finances, your resources, your possessions, what you own, what you have. And because Jupiter rules those things and it's in domicile, it's going in your 5th house, this is probably going to be like spending more money on fun things, making more money, so spending more money, making more money, gambling money, things like that, right? So that's really, really fun. We're going to, like I said, we're going to continue to talk about that as time goes on. But we pretty much start 2022 off with Jupiter ingressing into Pisces. The second thing, Venus. So Venus is going to be, by the time we start 2022, Venus will already be retrograde. Venus technically enters shadow in about November of 2021. It will be in shadow all of December of 2021. And then a couple of days before Christmas, Venus will station retrograde. I have a video about that. I will link it in the description somewhere and you will be able to watch it. But anyway, what you need to know though is Venus represents, again, value, love, romance, pleasure, connection, what we enjoy. Venus is going to be retrograding in the sign of Capricorn. So Venus, think of games. Capricorn is like rules and systems, right? Think of this Venus retrograde as a change to the rules, a change to the way that you play the game. Venus represents two things in your chart. Venus represents your 12th house. So Venus would represent your hidden enemies, isolation, alienation, repressed, unacknowledged parts of yourself. Venus also represents the subconscious too in the 12th house. But Venus also represents your 7th house of relationships. That's all relationships. So be it marriage, like your actual husband, wife, or partner or whatever. This could be your lawyer, your doctor, any individual that's just prominent in your life, has to be individual, is represented by the 7th house. Now, Venus rules that, and Venus is going to be retrograding in your 3rd. So the 3rd house represents short distance travel. It represents siblings, neighbors, people around you. It also rules like how you utilize like your knowledge and your time. And as Venus is retrograding in your 3rd, for one, this could be like a big change in like your relationship to your siblings, to like immediate family members. This could also be buying a new car issues. The 3rd house, I hate talking about the 3rd house because it rules a lot of different things. And so seeing where it's specifically going to come up is kind of like vague in a way. But like the things that you could for sure say is like, the 1st house represents you, right? And the 2nd house represents your money and what you have. The 3rd house represents how you use it. If the 9th house is higher education, the 3rd house is like basic elementary education. So maybe taking courses or classes. But Venus mostly represents, hidden enemies, open enemies, relationships. I think this is just a relationship change with maybe people around you, maybe with family members or something specific like that. We're going to keep talking about that here in a minute. Well, the 3rd house also rules like your schedule too. So this could be a change in like how you manage your time. This could be, the 3rd house rules short distance travel too. So this could be like maybe your car has issues. So you start taking like the bus or the train or whatever, and there's a shift in there. So anyway, just be open-minded with where this could show up. But we're going to come back to that in a few different ways. Whoops. There we go. So next thing. Venus is going to be retrograde pretty much all of January. But starting on January 14th, Mercury is going to go retrograde, which this is, the Mercury retrogrades happen all the time, but this is actually a pretty prominent one. Mercury is going to station retrograde in Aquarius, exactly square Uranus. This is important because Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde in your 4th house. The 4th house represents home, family, living situation. You've had Saturn here for the past year. So this has been getting a little bit more serious. You've been having to take on more responsibility, have more discipline, maybe even feeling a little bit more outcasted is a way to put it. As Mercury stations retrograde, Mercury retrogrades often represent delays. They represent, Mercury likes to play games and tricks, right? So it could just be something that kind of frustrates you and it's nothing really super important. But as Mercury stations retrograde in your 4th house, this could be a miscommunication with a family member. A family member telling you something that's very sudden and random, because Mercury is going to station retrograde squaring Uranus. So it's very sudden, it's very random, it's very unexpected, it's very out of the blue. Right when you thought things might be good, but there is going to be some type of unexpected thing going on with the home and the family stuff right at January 14th. So just expect a lot of family home stuff going on during this time. And that's mostly January. Just Jupiter is also going to be going through Pisces, so that's really good. But let's kind of continue. Oh, not to mention now, well, this is actually, in all of my other horoscopes, I didn't talk about the nodes, but now I am going to for you guys. I have a video about the nodes that should be either in the description or somewhere floating around YouTube. The nodes, which represent where the eclipses are going to be at, are going to be entering Taurus and Scorpio in the middle of January. This won't actually become important until spring and fall. So it's not actually really important that they move in around this time, but you will see things come up. And this is, it's funny, I didn't even talk about this with Taurus rising, but with Scorpio rising, why I want to bring this to your attention is the South Node represents drains, being exhausted, releasing, letting go of things, purging. And last year, I had the South Node go over my ascendant in my 1st house, and let me just tell you, you're going to slow down a little bit. You're going to get real tired, and you're going to change a lot of the ways that you identify yourself, that you view yourself. Yeah, we're going to continue to talk about that as time goes on, but the South Node going in your 1st house, just expect a real drain in energy. I never took naps my whole entire life. I don't even take naps now. But when the South Node hit my ascendant, I was taking like 2 naps a day. That was also during the pandemic, so that was one thing. But the South Node is like, this is a really weird transit. And we're going to talk more about it as the year goes on because we're just getting started. So anyway, January, that's pretty much it. Mercury will come back into Capricorn, and it's going to station direct on Pluto, which is pretty crazy. But that pretty much brings us to February 4th, which on February 4th, a few things are going to happen. The first thing is, actually, let's do this. We're going to go back, and then we're going to go day. There we go. So Mercury's going to station direct pretty much right on top of Pluto. By the time we get to the beginning of February, three things. Mercury's direct. Station's direct on Pluto. In the world and the economy and the stock market, you're going to hear about that, and that will be much more crazier than anything. But as Mercury, I mean, Mercury rules your 8th house of shared resources and other people's money and investments, and it also rules your 11th house of friends. It's on Pluto. Like, for some of you, maybe like 5 of you, maybe you have car issues and you got to buy a new car. Maybe this is like, you know, your first payment or something. That's very specific. I think Mercury stationing on Pluto is a lot of realities sitting, a lot of like understanding the situation at a much more shocking way, like in a very like crystal clear way. The second thing is Venus is now direct. Venus has been retrograding here for the past month. So your value and your relationship to your because the third house also rules communication, not just like speech, but like what are you communicating and how do you communicate it, right? Also rules your 7th house of relationships, 12th house of hidden enemies, 7th house of open enemies. So I think your relationship to engagement with people, your boundaries with people is definitely going to change. I think it's mostly going to come from family members though. Especially brothers or sisters or aunts and uncles and things like that, or neighbors. Venus will station direct. That's all changed and you get to start moving forward. But then Mars will also enter Capricorn. So this is kind of a double-edged sword because Mars is your ascendant ruler, right? We want Mars in a good place. Mars is exalted in Capricorn, which is a fancy way of saying Mars does really, really well here. Mars is about energy, drive, action, intention, fights, conflicts, separating, inflammation, things like that. In Capricorn, where Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so it's all about structures and systems and regulations, Mars in Capricorn has a lot of efficiency when it comes to utilizing its energy. Mars is going to go through your 3rd house. Again, the 3rd house rules a lot of things. So you're going to see it in like your schedule. You're going to see it in short distance travel. You're going to see it in your routine. This could involve cars too. I can't emphasize enough. You might be getting a new car or you might have some car issues. Mars is your ascendant ruler. This is just going to energize your 3rd house. So you're definitely doing more with family members, doing more with siblings, doing more in this area just in general. But this time it's much more about like January, things kind of go really downhill. And then February kind of hits a little bit of a bottom. Now, Mars is going to be flying through here. Now, the biggest thing about February too is starting around February 12th, Mars and Venus are going to be exactly conjoining each other. Now, Mars and Venus conjoin all the time together, but what's really interesting about this is Mars and Venus are going to be exactly on top of each other by the degree for pretty much a whole calendar month, which is pretty rare. And I don't want to say like intense, but that's just kind of like definitely something very specific. Venus and Mars together is like fun and competition. Like, you know, like have you ever played like it's like a game, it's like playing a game where instead of just like, oh, we're just trying to have fun, like everyone's actually like about that shit and like trying to actually like win and have some competitive edge, and it makes it more fun. Well, you're talking to a competitive person, so I think it's fun. But Mars and Venus going through your 3rd house is like really ramping up the energy when it comes to, again, utilization of your time, communication with people, short distance travel. So maybe this is, well, so the 3rd house also rules like tools in your immediate area, like how you use your tools. So this might be like really focusing on efficiency. Now, for example, this Venus retrograde is really kind of wrapping up what 2018, 2019, and 2020 brought for you. 2018, 2019, 2020, you've had Saturn go through your 3rd house. So I want you to think, what was going on in your 3rd house? Did you have more restrictions, more responsibilities? What disciplines did you have to take on in this area? Because Venus is kind of like bringing all of that together in a weird way. So just, again, it's nothing really new, but it is kind of finishing it all up, and you're going to have a lot of energy in this area. Mercury goes back into Aquarius, and again, Mars and Venus together, your 1st house ruler, your 7th house ruler. This could be involved with like much like a relationship at this time. And this isn't just like a romantic partner. This could be like hanging out with a sibling more, hanging out with a family member more, hanging out with your neighbor more. I don't know. But that all kind of changes by the time we get to March. So March 2nd is a really interesting day in general. First thing, there's a few things going on. One, Venus leaves shadow. So I want you to think about this. Venus enters shadow in November of 2021. It will be in shadow all of December of 2021. Stations retrograde a couple days before Christmas. Then it's retrograde all of January. Then it stations retrograde in February, but it still moves to shadow. And then by the time we get to the beginning of March, Venus finally leaves shadow and starts to gain new ground. That's 5 months of Venus being in the same spot of the sky in Capricorn. So that's a long time of the planet of like love and value and things that you enjoy in your third house. So there's going to be a big reshifting. Again, well, this is something I've talked about too in all the other horoscopes. Venus retrogrades are cyclical. Life is cyclical, right? So the last time Venus retrograded in Capricorn was January, February, and March of 2014. You can think back, what was going on in 2014 for you? And are there similarities that are repeating themselves now? Also, Mars and Venus are going to be conjoining Pluto. So this is really wrapping things up in kind of a big grand way, well, I also think as far as the economy goes and the stock market, things are going to be really, really crazy. And you think by this point, everyone's going to be knowing what's going on because I think it's going to be confusing for a while. This looks like a really big radical change in a lot of things, though. Mercury is going to be conjoining Saturn. This is important. We just had the Mercury retrograde in your 4th house. But as Mercury conjoins Saturn, this is like announcing a message, right? Mercury is like a microphone. Mercury is a messenger, right? It's like the mailman. And it's on top of Saturn. Saturn rules responsibilities. Saturn rules authority. It rules discipline. It rules maturity. It rules old people. It's in your 3rd house of communication and your 4th house of home and family. So I think a lot of this has to do with family stuff, really. But also, we have this new moon in your 5th house going on. So this is like really kind of clearing up the energy in the 5th house. What do you even want? What are you doing? What are you enjoying? Every planet is below the horizon. So this is a very personal time for you, to say the very least. But the big thing about March is Mars and Venus both go into Aquarius together. So by the time we get to the beginning of March here, Mercury, Saturn, Mars, Venus, all in your 4th house. This is a really funky energy when it comes to your home and your living situation. So like maybe doing new things. This is the way I've been really explaining March of 2022 is it's like kind of going to like a new school and being like the new kid. And it's kind of like you don't know what to do, but you do know what to do. And you kind of just have to see how things go. This looks like a really new start and a lot of energy focused on your living situation, your home and your family, everything that Venus retrograde kind of like brought. And also Mercury is going to enter Pisces. The big thing that I wanted to get to was this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction on, what day is this on? This is on March 20th. So, well, actually, right before we talk about this, I also have to mention Saturn's still in your 4th house, right? Venus and Mars are there too. But Mars and Venus are going to be squaring Uranus in your 7th house. So again, there's like, you're like, I think going to be focused on some like relationships and doing a lot with the home and family. But I think that's going to kind of rock the boat with a specific relationship. And there's a lot of instability and a lot of, newness that you kind of have to take on in this area. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment because Uranus and Saturn, we're not done talking about them. So Mercury is going to conjoin Jupiter in your 5th house. Look, Jupiter is going to go through your 5th house. A lot of you are going to have kids. A lot of you are going to get pregnant. A lot of you are going to just be having a lot more fun in general. Mercury conjoining Jupiter, though. Mercury rules your 8th house of like the 8th house. Well, the 5th house rules sex, number one. That's why it rules kids. 8th house can sometimes rule sex, but the 8th house rules death, other people's money, your partner's finances. It also rules your 11th house of your friends. Mercury conjoining Jupiter. Some of you are going to hook up with your friends. Some of you are going to be having a lot of fun with your friends, going out with your friends. This looks like just a really good time. I think Mercury conjoining Jupiter, though, it might be like kind of overwhelming. Like there's just going to be a lot going on that might be really new and exciting, but also just overwhelming, right? Like just make, you're going to be a little whelmed. But Mars and Venus just going through your 4th house. March is kind of weird. March is doing things in a new weird way, which that really does lead us to April. April things really, really change. Gosh, I have like this like little gnat that likes to fly right next to my face. So if you see me just like doing this, that's why. And I can't get rid of him. I've tried. He's like only one. You can tell I've been sitting here for a while. Anyway, hold on. My cat like instincts are coming in and I want to smack it out of the air. So I might just smack it out of the air randomly. So just don't pay attention to that. Anyway, we get to April. And here's the thing with April. We start April off with 2 things. One, we have like this Mercury Cazimi in your 6th house. So this is like clearing things up with your work, your day-to-day activities, your health. That's fun. That's great. But then everything changes on April 5th. So 2 big things, actually 3 big things on April. One is Mars-Saturn conjunction. So this is not the first Mars-Saturn conjunction we have had in Aquarius. The last time we had Mars conjoin Saturn in Aquarius in your 4th house. It was March 12th of 2020. I don't know if you remember what was going on that day, but that was the lockdown. That was the beginning of the lockdown, which is super funny because this is in your 4th house of home and family. So being like locked down at home was probably very specific for you guys. But Mars, Saturn in your 4th house, there's definitely some like restrictions, and there's definitely some like, isolating behavior, like alienating behavior, definitely like a lot of strict discipline things going on in your home, family, living situation. But Venus goes into Pisces. So to paint this a very specific way, and this is very specific for the Scorpio risings, Jupiter is going to be conjoining Neptune, right? For a lot of you that do, like, for like what you're going to see this look like in the mundane world is like you're going to see cinema and movies and like this renaissance of art and creativity. April is going to be where everyone parties and everything's going to be fun and everything's going to be open up again. April is great for that stuff. Jupiter is going to be on top of Neptune. Neptune rules things like fantasy, illusion. Neptune rules things like, spirituality at times. Jupiter is going to be conjoining Neptune. I think you're going to get kind of lost in the sauce. Like, in my opinion, have fun. This is a fun transit, and you only really get it once. Jupiter conjoining Neptune, though, you're going to be having kind of a lot of fun, really romanticizing whatever it is that you're doing. So whether, like, if you're wanting to have a kid, you're going to be really enjoying the romanticism of having a kid or what it's going to be like, or you're going to be fantasizing about it, or love, romance. For the musicians, the artists, this is so big for you guys. If you're an artist, if you're doing any of that, this is so big. You're going to be really, like, this is really the time to be putting energy into your art. Well, here's the thing. This is the analogy I've been using. Jupiter conjoining Neptune and Pisces in your 5th is literally like the Great Gatsby having a party. It's a rager. It's going crazy. And if you know the book, which I hardly do, but I know that he does throw these parties to get that one girl's attention. Venus entering Pisces is like that girl comes in. And Venus is going to go through Pisces. Pretty much expect April to be very lovey, romance, sex, pleasure, fun related. It's going to be a very, very good time. Mercury is also going to go over your descendant. It's looking like relationship stuff for you guys for the most part. Again, a lot of you are going to get pregnant. A lot of you are going to have a lot of fun. But like, yeah, this is the thing. A lot of you are just going to get in relationships. A lot of you are going to get pregnant. Some of you might even get married. It's just going to be a blast all the way around. Now, that leads me to this day, April 30th. Now, if you watch my horoscopes regularly, you know I have talked ad nauseum about April 30th. It is the best day of the year. It's amazing. It's great for multiple reasons. And out of all of the signs, Scorpio rising, you guys probably get to enjoy it the most, which is funny. The Libra risings get to enjoy it the least, in my opinion. But Venus is going to conjoin Jupiter. The two good planets, the best planets in the sky, are together, and one of them's home sign, Jupiter's home sign of Pisces, right? But every planet has an exalted degree. Like, there's a favorite degree of each planet. Venus's favorite degree to be in the whole zodiac is 28 degrees Pisces. Lo and behold, zoom in, Venus is on top of Jupiter at 28 degrees Pisces on Neptune. In the 5th? Like, Jesus Christ, don't have too much fun. Like, that looks great. I mean, like, again, I can't emphasize enough. Sex, pleasure, romance. I mean, of course, it's not going to look like that for everybody, but you're going to just, like, it's 5th house rules hobbies too. So just having fun in general is just what's on the menu for us. Venus conjoining Jupiter. Here's the other thing. Jupiter rules 2nd house of money. So this is good for money, but this is also an eclipse in your 7th house. Like I said before, the eclipses are now in your 1st house and your 7th house. This is what we're talking about here. That South node is going to be in your 1st house, where I think you're going to be kind of detaching and changing a lot of the ways that you see yourself and your identity. But the North node going through your 7th house, you're going to be very hungry for a relationship, and you're going to be very focused on making connections and trying to find solid ground in a relationship. Uranus is here, so I think if you do get in a relationship, or if there are relationships, it's very unexpected, it's very unpredictable, but like in a fun, good way. But this eclipse is in your 7th house, and it's ruled by Venus. Like, again, a lot of you are going to get pregnant. A lot of you are going to have a lot of fun, and a lot of you are going to get in relationships. If you are a Scorpio rising and you're not absolutely living your best life at this time, you are doing it wrong. It looks great, that's how we start May. Now, as we get into May, really the big things that we got to go over is this. Let's go back to There we go. So in May, the really only thing we've got going on is first, Jupiter enters Aries. This is cool. Number one, Jupiter rules your second house of your money and your finances. And it also rules, again, your fifth house of love, romance, creativity, more specifically too, like creation in general. And it's going into your sixth house of your work, your routines, your labor, your health. I'm assuming you're going to be really like taking on a big workload here. I think you're going to be enjoying your work. For a lot of you Scorpio risings, your midheaven will be in Leo too, so Jupiter will be trining it. This is really good for work and money is what I'm trying to say. It's really good for work and money. I think you guys are going to be really busy and doing a lot. That might be overwhelming, but it'll be good to say the least. Which brings us to the very end of May. On May 30th, May 28th here, Mars is going to conjoin Jupiter. Mars is your ruling planet. And I think as Mars is in your fifth house, from like all of April, I think you're going to get kind of lost in the sauce, like having a lot of fun. And then it's like May 28th, Mars can join Jupiter. Like you guys are just going to be on your shit, like on your A game. Be careful of accidents because the sixth house rules. So in astrology, the first house rules good health and the sixth house rules ill health. Mars rules both of these houses in your chart, and Mars is going to be in your sixth house of ill health. I think if you guys party really hard in April, this is recovery time, and you're going to kind of feel it. The South Node is on your ascendant. You're going to be pretty tired. You're going to be kind of drained. You're going to be needing to purge things and get things out of your system and move on from things. I'm telling you, like you're going to be, if you feel like you got to take a nap, take a nap. Feel like you got to get rid of something, get rid of it. Change it, like get rid of your clothes, change your wardrobe out, cut your hair a different way. That's what you're supposed to do with the South Node. But as Mars goes into your sixth house and conjoins Jupiter, this is like focusing on your health, focusing on your work, really just getting down into your schedule, right? Venus is now in Taurus, so there's a big focus on relationships. Mercury is going to be stationing direct, squaring Saturn, though. So there is kind of like this enforcement of boundaries and rules that you're going to have to do with relationships. That's more starting in June, though. So June, now we're at June. Here's the thing. June doesn't have a lot going on. You guys are going to enjoy it for the most part, but here's what's going on. Saturn's going to station retrograde in your fourth house. Saturn has given you more discipline. Saturn has given you more authority, and it's given you more responsibility in your home life, your living situation, your family. As Saturn stations retrograde, the weight of that responsibility and the pressure of that authority will kind of set in, and it might make you kind of like struggle a little bit with maybe things that you're taking on or all of the serious sides of life at the moment. I mean, Mercury also like stations direct, square Saturn, and then right as Mercury stations direct, Saturn stations retrograde. So there's this weird handoff between relationships and like home and living situation stuff. I think, again, this does also bring up family stuff. Venus is going to be going through your seventh house, though. Again, I like it for the relationship stuff. Mars going through your sixth house, too. A lot of work. A lot of energy is focused on your day-to-day life, your work, your health. What I want to get to, though, is like Venus is going to conjoin Uranus in the North Node. So again, I said this jokingly earlier, but like don't get married that fast. Don't move in with this person that fast because things are going to go really fast in the relationship world for you, in my opinion. Because Venus will conjoin the North Node in Uranus, things are going to get really sporadic. Things are going to get really intense and fun in the relationship sector, but also they're going to be unpredictable and kind of unstable. Which brings me to the end of June. We have like this Venus-Saturn square where like you're going to have to, I think, enforce a lot of like rules and boundaries, and there's going to be like relationships will be good, but there's going to be a certain distance around them. And I think this is really going to come from family stuff, again, more specifically. But I think in the love romance department, things are good at this point. And I think if you guys are married, well, here's the thing. If you're married, this year is not about you. This year's about your partner. They got a bunch of shit going on. Like the South Node's going over your ascendant. This is not your year if you're married. But that's June. I mean, Mars and Jupiter all through your 8th. Venus, I mean, like Mars is going to have dignity. Saturn will have dignity. Venus will have dignity. Mercury will have dignity. June's looking pretty all right. And then, I mean, Venus and Mercury will go through your 8th where you're probably going to be a little bit more like tripping, but it's not really the biggest deal. It really isn't. Not enough for me to talk about in this monthly horoscope. In this year ahead horoscope. Which that leads us to July. Two things happen in July, and they really don't even happen to the very, very end. So let's kind of just fast forward. Oh, well, not really. One of them happens at the beginning. That's Mars entering Taurus. Is this good or is this bad? That is the $1,000,000 question. I don't know. Even if, for some people, this isn't even, sect doesn't even matter with this because this involves both malefics. But here's the thing. This year is about relationships for you guys. And at this point, things start getting really tricky because Mars is your ascendant ruler, right? So it represents you and it's in the 7th house of relationships. So I think you're going to be more involved with another person at this time, just in general. But it's Mars in Taurus. So maybe like things are starting to like get a little bit more stable and secure in this relationship. Maybe things are getting a little bit more like stubborn too. Like it's just kind of like you're feeling a little bit more stuck with this person. Maybe not in a bad way. But again, also Mars rules fights and conflict. So there might be some like passive aggression here. And there's more of like an anger and conflict with the relationships in your life. And that pretty much begins at the beginning of July. And that's going to build up all through July. And we face what that is in August, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But let's get to the very, very end of July. I know this is Libra rising, but just give me a second. When we get to the end of July, two things happen. Well, really one thing happens. One is Jupiter stations retrograde. This is a big deal because Jupiter flew. It flew through Pisces and is now stationing retrograde in Aries. So Jupiter is all about, again, hope, optimism, abundance, and gifts and good things, right? Jupiter flew through your 5th house. You had a lot of love. You had a lot of sex. It was all fun. You made some money. Then Jupiter went into Aries in your 6th house where you're working hard. You're taking on a new job. Your money's good. But then Jupiter stations retrograde where the money truck kind of runs out. And you kind of have to remind yourself, okay, what did you learn this whole time? How are you integrating that knowledge? And like, what are you grateful for? You might go a little bit without work at this time, or there might be a little bit of a decrease. Well, it's like when Jupiter increases, if it decreases a little bit, that decrease could feel like a big drop. And that's what this is going to feel like, especially when it comes to money and work and like fun stuff. But it's not the big thing ever. But Jupiter stationing retrograde is going to be pretty big only because just Jupiter has, it goes through Pisces, it conjoins Neptune, it conjoins Venus, and then it goes into Aries and it conjoins Mars and then stations retrograde. So there's just so much to like rethink about by the time Jupiter stations retrograde, especially when it comes to your work, your health, and your habits. Also pets too. The 6th house rules pets, which is really important. So that Mars-Jupiter conjunction, even in May, could be like you buying a pet or you getting more pets or you having too many and having a zoo in your house. But like I said, August 1st. This is, and I've talked a lot about this. Like, this is the worst day of 2022, and this is really going to be a big deal for you guys because Mars is your ruling planet, and it's on Uranus in your 7th house on the North Node. This is one of two things. This is either a really big sudden breakup or a really big sudden, again, getting married really fast or something. This could also involve family member stuff, and I'll explain that in a minute. But Mars is in your 7th house, right? Fights, conflicts with relationships. It's on top of Uranus. There's a lot of like Mars and Taurus is like not wanting to budge, but then Mars, Uranus, North Node is like budging and moving last second, taking a very sudden action, very like a knee-jerk reaction to things. It's on the North Node. It's like the North Node in your 7th house is like other people's emergencies or your emergencies, right? And Mars, Uranus, North Node on August 1st, just expect a lot of unexpected, destabilizing, random separation, random action with relationships. This could even be like, let's say if you're married and like everything's fine, this could be like your partner just doing something very sudden and random, like being like, no, fuck it, we're going to do this. It's not, again, what I want to warn you guys about too is astrology is not always that deep. So again, this isn't always going to be like super, super big for everybody. It's just important to understand where to look for things. So there's going to be this, which is very sporadic, very sudden, very destabilizing. But then we get to August 7th, where Mars then squares Saturn. This is the definition of going nowhere fast. Mars is in Taurus, where this is like sticking your feet in the sand and you're not moving. And Saturn in Aquarius, it ain't moving either. So I think, again, a lot of this has to do with the family stuff. This could involve coworkers simply because Mars is your 6th house ruler of employees and coworkers, and it's in your 7th house of other people, and it's squaring Saturn. I don't know how exactly this is going to look. The one way I would say it, though, is that there's going to be this frustration and that there's this conflict, I think, in a relationship in your life. I think it might involve a superior. It might involve an authority. It might just involve your parents. It might involve family members. But I think a lot of this has to deal with Like this is just a really rough patch at the very end of the day. We start April's amazing, May is amazing. Hell, June is fine, but then it's like, man, that last August really, the first week of August really does suck. It's a really shitty week. But we move on from it. Life goes on like normal. And that's really all of August. We just deal with that for the rest of August. Mars will enter Gemini, which this is the big thing. Mars going into Gemini, you're going to be like skeptical about, you're just going to be like super on edge when Mars goes into Gemini. You're going to be on like, you're like, I'm tripping, freaking out about your money, freaking out about like certain things here and there. I think you're going to be feeling very like lost and like drained because again, the South Node's going over your ascendant. You're going to feel very exhausted. And I think as the Mars goes in the 8th house, you may just not have a lot of energy at this point. Which really brings us to September because that's really all that's going on in August. So let's talk about September. So we get to September and the big thing that's really going on, there's only really two big things. Mars enters shadow. So this is the big thing here. Mars is going to retrograde in your 8th house. Whew, God, I forgot this is going on for you guys. So what's important about this at this moment in the beginning of September is whatever you're doing, meaning Mars is like action, drive, energy, fights, conflicts. Mars is in Gemini where we're fighting with our words. We're fighting with our, our rationale, with what we know. Mars in Gemini is very distracted. It's like very like multitasking, but it's in your 8th house of like other people's money, shared resources. So there could be like, relying on other people's money, using other people's money. This is a focus on your debts and money that you owe. The 8th house rules fears. So you're just going to be tripping. Mars is your ruling planet and it's going to be your 8th house. You're just going to be tripping, just in general. But Mars enters shadow, which means whatever you're doing at this point regarding like 8th house stuff. So like that could even be sex or death or occult stuff. You're going to come back to in a couple months. So it's just really important to be paying attention to what's going on here at this point because you're going to come back to. Which that leads us to Mars enters shadow, and then a couple days later, Mercury's going to station retrograde. This Mercury retrograde is really interesting for a few reasons. One, it's opposite Jupiter, and Jupiter's retrograde, and this is like I feel like the best time for us to really look at like, okay, what was this Jupiter in transit about? What did it give you? Mercury's retrograding in your 12th house, where it's like the 12th house rules the subconscious, it rules hidden enemies, it rules things that you didn't see. So I think there's a lot of like. Well, here's the other thing. Mercury rules your 8th house of like shared resources and other people's money. And as Mercury retrogrades in your 12th house, I think there's going to be things that you're going to become aware of that you didn't know before regarding shared resources and other people's money. Mercury's going to go opposite Jupiter. This is going to be like, what's yours? What's mine? How are we blending this all together? How are we balancing this all out? And then pretty much that's mostly September. The only really other thing that we've got going on in September is like Mars will be in shadow, but Mars is going to be trining Saturn. So here's the thing. Mars is going to retrograde, which on the surface is bad. But what I like about this Mars retrograde is that it is trining Saturn. So that's constructive. So, one of the ways I've been interpreting that is, like working out and dieting is like challenging. It's hard, but it's constructive. That's like what this Mars retrograde trine Saturn is like. It's going to be there's going to be some problems. It's going to be difficult, but it's constructive. It's for your good, if that makes sense. So this is something to keep in mind here. So that's pretty much September. And then we get to October where, again, everything changes. And this is what I wanted to say. I briefly mentioned this earlier in this horoscope. The first thing is Saturn-Uranus. Saturn has been squaring Uranus since the beginning of 2021, summer of 2021, winter of 2021, and we get I'm pretty sure this is the final and the last Saturn-Uranus square in 2022. I want you to think, Saturn's been in your 4th house, home, family, your living situation. Saturn's been there, right? Taking on more responsibility, taking on more obligations, maybe more isolation, maybe more alienation, but it's been squaring Uranus. Uranus has been your 7th house of relationships. There's been this unpredictable thing with other people regarding your home and living situation. That was all of 2021. That comes back down here again, where there's something very unexpected with relationships and living situation stuff at this point. For some of you, that's going to be like if someone moves in with you and then they move out. And then maybe you move in with someone and then maybe you stop living with that person. Maybe you move back home because that's the thing nowadays. I don't know what that's going to be, but it's going to be a very unexpected rope or rug pull essentially between home and relationship stuff. Mars is trining Saturn though, so maybe this might be like, maybe you move back home to save more money. One of those things. Also in October, let's kind of move forward a little bit in October. In the middle of October, again, Mars is still in shadow, so it's still setting up all the context for everything to happen. But Mars is going to square Neptune, where I don't like this transit. It's not the worst, but I think like this isn't good for like mental health things. Like I think Mars and Gemini in the 8th house, I think you're just gonna be very skeptical and worried and anxious in general. So it's gonna be, and I mean like plus the sun's going through your 12th house. Like I think you're just gonna be tripping like about a lot of things. It's just one of those times. I think the best thing for you during this time is to really like find ways to like relax, alleviate yourself. Because I think again, you're gonna be tripping. This isn't the time to be like taking action and doing a bunch of stuff. Mars is gonna square Neptune, and the problem is Mars is in your 8th, which is like you're tripping about stuff. Mars and Gemini is like you're trying to be busy, but it's squaring Neptune and Pisces in your 5th. There's like Neptune in your 5th house is like romanticizing like love and romance and sex and children. But like Mars squaring Neptune is like being confused about what you want and like being very uncertain about what it is that you want or what you're doing for that. There's a lot of, I think you kind of, Mercury's in your 12th house, Venus. There's a lot of self-sabotage here. Things kind of like feeling, you're just going to be tripping is a good way to put it. And I think the biggest thing is Mars squaring Neptune. You're just going to be uncertain of what your next move is or what you even want. Mars is slowing down and it's going to station retrograde and square Neptune again. So there's this like, again, I can't emphasize this enough. There's going to be this big back and forth of like thinking you want something and then realizing you don't want it and then kind of going back and forth. And we'll talk about that as time goes on. Then pretty much, well, here's the other thing too. Like I said, Mars is going to be trining Saturn. Plus, we're going to have the Sun and Venus trining Mars too. I think this is a very constructive Mars retrograde, albeit confusing and frustrating. It's going to be constructive though, which at the end of the day means good things. So pretty much you get to the end of October and we have this Venus Cazimi right at 29 Libra in your 12th house, where there's like this like inner peace that you find for like 5 minutes. It's like everything's nice and dandy in your head. Some things start to really make sense, but then we get to here and this Venus Cazimi continues into Scorpio. Everything goes into your 1st house and eclipse season starts. Everything really starts to change really right here. You're going to get, well, this is kind of a lot now that I'm thinking about it. The Sun and Venus going in your 1st house is going to feel much more energized, but as it hits that south node, this is going to be kind of like, how I talked about earlier, a lot of this year is about purging and releasing. I think this is when you know what you need to get rid of at this time. And this is when you're going to start getting rid of it. And that pretty much leads us straight into November. Well, like on Halloween, it's Halloween where Mars stations retrograde, right? So Mars is going to station retrograde in your 8th house. Mars rules separation, cutting, inflammation. It's going backwards, right? We're doing things differently. It's kind of like we're moving forward in one area. Now we got to kind of move backwards a little bit. And this is in your 8th house, shared resources, other people's money, other people's stuff. I think this is going to be getting rid of a lot of stuff. Honestly, I think this is just, you're going to be getting rid of a lot of stuff, selling a lot of things, maybe paying off some debt. Here's the other thing. In November, Jupiter will also go back into Pisces. So again, Jupiter entered Pisces in December, flew through it from January, February, March, April. Then in May, it entered Aries, and it was in Aries from May, June, July, August, September, October. And then in November, Jupiter goes back into Pisces, and it's retrograde still. I think this is good because look how much wetness there is. It's all Pisces and Scorpio stuff. A lot of water, a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings, a lot of feeling good. But I think this is like really feeling yourself in a way. Jupiter's in your 5th house where you're really going like, okay, what do I want? What's worth keeping around? What's not worth keeping around? Which that's what really November is. And I mean, like when you look at these water transits, November is just a very wet month. But that leads us to November 8th. August 1st, November 8th. Those are the 2 bad days of 2022. Let's break this down. There is so much going on here. For one, it's a Mercury Cazimi. So communications are being had. Things are becoming clear. Mercury rules your 8th house of death, other people's money, inheritance, shared resources, debt, taxes. This is an eclipse in your 1st house. A lot of things are becoming very clear. It's on the south node. You know what, like the north node is like what you want to do, and the south node is like what if you want to do this, you got to do this. It's like the north node is going to be in your 7th house. You're going to really want a relationship, but the south node is going to be in your 1st house. That means you kind of have to change parts of yourself, like maybe whatever that means for you. I don't even want to go into that. But also, this is not only a Mercury Cazimi, it's also an eclipse on top of Uranus. So it's a total lunar eclipse in your 7th house. This is a full moon is what this is supposed to be. And full moons, illuminate things. It brings a lot of light and attention. A lot of, right? And so this is happening in your 7th house of relationships. So I think this is bringing up a lot of light, looking at your relationship, looking at other people, saying, what's going on here? It's on top of Uranus. That destabilizing, sudden things changing energy. This is literally an eclipse exactly on top of Uranus. Expect a huge shakeup in relationships. For some people, this could be getting in a relationship. For some people, this could be getting out of a relationship. This is also squaring Saturn in the 4th. Here's the thing, guys. Fixed signs do not bend, they break. This is not like this is very like a snap type energy. So, and I mean, the ruler of this eclipse too, Mars, is retrograding in your 8th. You're going to find out some stuff. Things are going to be confusing. You're going to be uncertain. A lot of things really change here. So what I would just say is prepare for a pretty intense beginning of November regarding relationship stuff. Expect the unexpected. Expect it to shake things up a bit. And pretty much that's how we have November. That's it. Like that, November is that. And I think we just kind of deal with the repercussions of that as the month goes on. The other thing I want to point out, though, is more towards the middle and the end of November, Mercury and Venus still on top of each other, trining Jupiter and Neptune. Like I said, it's a very wet month, very emotionally deep. It's in your 1st house of yourself and your body, and your 5th house, again, love, romance, sex, pleasure. Very emotional year for you guys in a fun and good, intimate ways. But this is a very deep time, very, very deep time. Then Mercury and Venus will enter your 2nd house. Things get much more focused on money. And the only other thing to really bring up in November is like by the end of November, there's like this Mercury-Venus conjunction in your 2nd house, which Mars is going retrograde in your 8th. That's really all about money, in my opinion, for you guys. Like a lot of this year is about money in a lot of weird ways. But I think Mercury and Venus in your 2nd house is realizing, okay, now that I'm kind of changing my ideas about what I owe and investments and stuff, this is kind of like learning what to do with your money, having a better idea of what you need to do. November's intensity kind of goes away, and this is just much more focused on money stuff at this point. Jupiter stations direct. I think you're going to be having more fun again at this point. The Mars retrograde won't be so sufferable. And then, gosh, we get into December. The only things we really got going on December is full moon on top of Mars. We always have a full moon on top of Mars when it's retrograde. But this is like, let's say if you need to make a big purchase, or like, let's say you need to pay off some debt. This is when you pay it off. This is when you take care of your shit. This is just taking care of your business, essentially. Doing what you got to do. For some of you, this could be buying a house too, since it's trining Saturn. Mercury and Venus are going to be conjoining through your 3rd house. We're right back to where we were last winter. So think about, again, the family stuff, the sibling stuff, the short distance travel stuff. A lot of the South Node is on your guys' ascendant. So again, I think this is going to be a draining, it's going to be an exhausting year for you guys. Let me tell you. And then by the end of end of December, Jupiter goes back into your 6th house. We have that focus on work, money, career stuff. And then really the last thing is at the very end of December, Mercury is going to station retrograde on Venus again at that same part of the sky while Mars is still retrograde. At that point, it's a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. I ain't even going to talk about it. That's what's going on this year for you guys. Like this video for me. If you actually enjoyed this content, let me know that you like it by liking this video. It really helps me out. I appreciate it. Let me know in the comments what month you're most excited for, what month you're not looking forward to. This is a big year for the Scorpio risings specifically because you guys get the best of the best and the worst of the worst this year. So it's kind of a lot going on. But anyway, thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next year.